I think this is going now. I don't know. It says it's live. I've got a thing that says it's live. Okay, so this version should be a version everyone sees. Yeah, just delete the old one. I'm trying to think. Usually when new versions come out, what you can do is, oh yeah, so I guess you should tell anyone for the video. Get whatever the newest version is on GitHub. It's always the place to go. But yeah, usually, Sharon, when things like, if we update the version, you should now only have to download the new version and then copy your experiments folder in, and everything should mostly work. Right now, that's not as true because we're making like big changes on a pretty regular basis. Cool. I think the first thing we should show, should we just talk about the stuff we've done this week, Tyson?
Wait.
Oh, that was an okay. They said wait. You're panicked. Okay, so the first thing that's awesome and nice and is going to make our lives easier, if you open conditions.txt, oh god, why is it huge? Now stimuli, you just write the name of the file. You don't have to say stimuli / I just assume you're putting all the stimuli files in the stimuli folder. So if you're not, and if you're in the stimuli folder and you say you have subfolders in there, you can still do like, set1, and you can have a set1 folder inside. But 99% of the time, what everyone's doing is this, is just putting files in there. So now it's a lot more readable. Same with the procedure folder. So here we have stimuli. So these are all the files we're using. And the condition file, you just write the name of the file you're using. Same with procedure. We just say, okay, go to procedure. These are all the procedure files we're using. A bigger change in the stimuli files, we've talked about this for a long time, is we deleted the column called target. So this was originally from Nate's original ideas. He just called them Qs and targets. So when I named the columns, I had a Q column and a target column and an answer column. What we found is almost everybody, even myself, would just write down all the targets and then copy them into the answer column because we were scoring based on answer. So we just deleted the target column and now it scores based off answer.
But you can add target column if you want.
Yeah, you can add whatever columns you want. So if you really want to call it target, you can call it target. You'll have to change a few things, like in the word pair file or in like the study trial. It's assuming that you have a Q and an answer is what it's going to show. Yeah. So if you really want a target column, you can go in there and change these things. But
just remember, people, you can like add whatever you want.
Yeah, add whatever you want to columns. Columns are super useful, which I think will be a bigger part of today. As we talk about data analysis, that's a big part of kind of making your life easy with data. So we dropped a target column. What else did we do, Tyson, this week? So these are the things I did. Should we show them condition 11, which has some crazy stuff in it probably now?
That one has the new trial types.
Okay, so I'm trying to think, is there anything else that changed that's worth mentioning for like users, stuff that would impact their lives? The biggest thing is that conditions is now.
You mentioned that like in the conditions you don't write procedure.
Yeah. So you don't write procedure, you don't write stimuli anymore. And then Tyson made some new trial types, which will show. Oh, so this is going to happen, which always happens, is that my WAMP server is not on, so that won't work. Server turned on, everything works again. Whoa, this text is pretty big. Oh yeah, we fixed the centering on this thing. So if you looked at last week's version, it's just a thing that always bothered me. This didn't really ever look centered. It always looked a little too low. So we kind of pushed it up a little bit.
It looks a little high.
No, that looks good to me. That's center, Tyson.
So does that change depending on their screen size?
Yeah, so I guess right now I have a tiny screen, so you're seeing a really big version, but it will still center based on the screen. So if I kind of try to drag this to show you how the centering works. It doesn't work all that well when your screen's tiny, like resizing it, because there's not much room to resize. But who has a really big screen? Like who's got a full resolution screen and can show us? Tyson, yours is pretty decent, right? Okay, so are you screen sharing? I'm going to select you. Oh yeah, and if anyone watched the last week's thing, for about 45 minutes you were just looking at whatever Tyson was doing randomly, because we found out that if I share his screen, it continues sharing it until I stop it. So you can resize the screen, Tyson. You should see, like... So it does a pretty good job of tracking like where's center. So again, dumb little changes that we're making. Oh wait, I should stop looking at Tyson's screen unless you want to see what he's doing for the next hour.
I'm just gonna start crying.
Writing blackmail messages and hate notes to everybody. Tyson added the ability he was talking about last week. So condition 11 has JWells, right?
Yep.
11 has everything.
Yep.
Does that include the trials you created?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can explain what they do because I have not looked at them yet.
Right.
So same old stuff. Here's some instructions. Oh, I also made the screen a little bigger before. I think it was limited to 600 pixels was the biggest it would get. I upped it to 900 because I just think it looks a little better. This is all old stuff. We've seen this before. Okay, so here's a JWell trial. Before, I could type anything I want. So right now I'm going to hit G. Nothing happens. If I hit any of the letter keys, nothing happens.
Just G is prevented.
Yeah, it's preventing. No, we're preventing all the numbers. So we force numeric on them. And actually show you the code, which makes it really easy to do this on anything you want to do, which Tyson wrote for us. So here, you say I can type 100. I think I'm awesome, or 0 if I think I'm dumb. But I think the important thing is how easy it is from your perspective, how to do this on any input you want. So if you just get, so this is a JWell, so whenever we want to see code for a trial, you go to the code folder and just look at trial types. So we're looking at JWell. And so before JWell was just a file, I guess this is also worth talking about. Before, we just showed you that all the trial types were just files inside of this folder called trial. It has custom scoring on it. You can actually make it a folder instead of a file name. So here, instead of a JWell.php file, we have a folder called JWell. I open that, and there's a trial file which says this is how you show a JWell, and then the scoring file which says this is how you should score trials that are like this. So I'll just show you the trial file. Open that in Aptena, because Aptena is very pretty. There we go. So this stuff, I guess we can walk people through kind of what goes into. So comp time just says if we write computer as a timing, how long should it be? In this case, we'll set it to 8 seconds. And all we're doing in the JWell trial, it's a pretty simple trial type. We say div, which means just make a box, and we call it text center because text center has some properties that say put the text in the center of the screen, which makes sense. We have an H3 element, which is just H is the headline element, so this is like if you want big text. H1 is the biggest, 2 is the smallest, and it goes down to H6, I think. So to correctly recall this item in a later test. Again, if you want to ask a different question for JWell or anything where they're getting, a question, you can grab this trial, rename that. But the thing that's important here is, okay, so here's how we get responses from people. I think it's worthwhile when we start talking about data. The way everything works is, on your end, it's pretty simple. So you make a forum, and generally what we do if we tell people is just copy one of the forums that already exists because we're doing some special stuff like, we say create a forum, the class is equal to forum class, and all this means is that the code is figuring out whether or not it should be user or computer timed. So this little class element tells it when we set this trial as user timed, give it a name that will hide the input button, collector form, text center. So these are all the classes it has. But generally, if you want to make a new input, so you want them to answer something, just copy this forum, which says, okay, forums are a place to put inputs. And if you look at the page or back on the trial, all we have is a single input where people, and that's this input right here. We just say input. The name is what it will be recorded as. So if you name it JWell, then in your output it'll be named JWell. If you use it as a post1, it'll say post1 underscore JWell. So whatever name you give it, it's how the data is going to be labeled. And this gets to kind of good practices of when you're thinking about experiments, it's really useful from the beginning to start thinking about what's my data going to be, how am I going to do this data analysis. So stuff like naming your columns, things that are, if you want to compare things together, if they have the same name in the column, it makes it a lot easier. This type equals text just means what type of input it is. There's different options, but generally text box just means give me a box to write some text in. Value just means what does it start as. So if I set, right now, when I load this trial, it shows me nothing. So if I refresh, it's a page with nothing on it. If I set the value to like Mikey, I save that. it should load as my key. So it puts a value in there for you. Generally, you want to leave it blank unless for some reason you want to give them a value already. You could say, sometimes people do like type here.
Be a variable.
So if you wanted to do a variable, you can do the way we always put variables. So here we're in HTML. We're not in PHP. We're just writing HTML code. So if we wanted to put a variable there, we can say start some PHP. And we can use Tyson's way of just saying equal and then give it a variable name like
Actually,
var.
that would just be question mark equal.
A question mark equal?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. And var.
Yep.
And close it. And then we can set var up here. We can write some code that says var is equal to, oops, not car. See, my problem with typing is equal to, let's just say current trial. Current trial is just a way to point at the trial we're on. We set it for you, so you'd say current trial stimuli, whatever, extra. Say you add a column called extra. Whatever that value is, it'll be set to var. Or, will this work on stimuli, Tyson? We can just use extra. Because you're setting up the aliases, right?
Well, you don't have an extra column. So
No, but I'm saying if there was an extra column.
Oh, I think that the aliases only happen for what's in your ordered file. So
What's in your order?
stimuli
Okay.
file, you still need to use this current trial stimuli.
Yeah, so if you wanted to grab something from the stimuli file, you do it this way. But what Tyson set up in the order file, say if you have a column called settings, which we'll talk about later, if you put something in settings, and so usually if it's a trial type, you write settings. If it's post-trial, you'd say post1 settings. But if you did that, then you wouldn't have to access it in a special way. You can just write settings.
Right, I'll actually demonstrate that in the liquor type.
Yeah, so settings is basically the value. It already exists for you. So if this, you can just write settings, and that would give you whatever value showed up in that settings column. Yeah, Tyson will show you how to do that later. But then the value generally, we tend to leave it blank. I mean, at least for the stuff I'm doing, we just say make it empty so people generally know they're supposed to type there. Autocomplete off gets around this problem we had really early on, that if you've ever been to lots of websites, I'll refresh it. Oops, did I save? Oh, let's type here because I didn't save it again. So lots of websites where you go and you start typing your username, so I'm GuyKMRC everywhere. I can't type GuyKMRC. Pretend my username is 100. So I start typing it, and it'll give you a pop-down menu saying, hey, do you mean this? We don't want this, and if we're giving them a test, we don't want to suggest answers for them or things they typed before. So if you put autocomplete is equal to off, that just says don't guess for them, just let them type whatever they want. And the important part that Tyson added, which makes it very easy for you, if you add the class force numeric on an input, they can't type anything but numbers anymore.
You can also put periods, so they can be fractional.
Oh yeah, so they can do like 3.5. So if they're on a Likert scale, or as Tyson apparently the correct way to say it is Likert scale, if you wanted to give them the option of like, oh, type from 1 to 7, how you feel, they could say, I feel 3.5 happy. As cognitive people, we would say.
Where do you put the period?
Oh no, so
Well, that's just something they can type in along with their numbers.
Yeah, so I can type-
Mary can also do periods.
yeah, so it'll let them type a period, so they can put a decimal point. Like
What
if you have the
do
math problems or
want that?
something, they what?
What if you don't want that?
To type period?
Yeah.
You'd have to get into the JavaScript.
No.
So actually, Tyson, how confusing is the JavaScript?
Specifically, that part isn't too complicated. You'd have to know where to look, but I guess I can show you.
I guess this is a good point too, before we even show the JavaScript, to explain the separation of HTML and JavaScript and kind of what each does. So we talked about before when we were making trial types that CSS, HTML is like, here's the structure of it. So if we look at HTML, we're saying there's a box, it has a headline in it, and then it has a paragraph, has a line break, and then there's a form, and the form has some inputs on it. So we're saying this is the structure of the web page. CSS says, how do we show this structure? And what JavaScript generally does is say, how do we interact with this structure? Like, if you want things to happen as they're doing it, or as they're interacting with the page, you generally have to write some JavaScript. JavaScript is kind of an ugly language. I try to avoid it, and we do lots of stuff for you that avoids the JavaScript for you. So like, okay, before we show what Tyson's going to show. So on the page, you have one input, right? There's this input, but we also, if you look at the HTML, there's these other inputs. that you pretty much put on every single page. So input class is equal to hidden. That the class name, we use CSS to say don't show this input. So technically there's a box there, but we don't show it to anybody. The ID is RT, which is reaction time. You give it a name, RT. So in your data it'll be recorded as RT. And this stuff, basically because it exists on the page in this formatting, all the JavaScript is in the background keeping track of the time and looking at how long they're on the page, looking at when you first press a key. You know, RT last tells you when's the last key press on the page. Form submit button here, this is the button that in this case shows up, but if we had set the, you know, if this had been a computer time trial, the form class name here would have told the code to not show that button. So generally if you're going to make an input, these last four, or you're going to make a forum, I would just copy a form, and then if you want to add new inputs, just change this first line here. Because the other stuff is needed to make the timing and all that stuff run in JavaScript. And you don't really have to know how the timing works, but let's say I wanted to ask two things here. So I can just copy that JOL input, paste below it, and let's call this one response. How confident are you is the, oh wait, not type, oops. In the value I can type confidence, question mark. In the value of this one I can type JOL, question mark. And I can change the headline to how likely are you to correctly recall this item on later test. And I can make another headline here saying how confident are you that your estimates are correct. So it's kind of a weird thing to ask somebody, but let's just assume we want to different. So we want to say give us a JOL and then give us some sort of confidence. We'd name it, you know, confidence to record differently. Now when I refresh this trial, so I save it. I saved and then so here we ask two questions. So how likely are you to correctly recall this item? How confident are you? And we can give them values so they know, okay, I typed my JOL here, 100. And we can even say, okay, say we want to allow confidence, we want to let them type in. We can tell them to use the scale, but let's assume we pretend they didn't listen to us. So here, they can't type any words, you know, they can't describe their JOL, but they can say, you know, 75. And in this one, they can say very. So that's a nice way to show, like, we're not really doing that much in the code, but we're getting lots of extra functionality, lots of extra inputs. In your data, there will now be a column called confidence for this trial because you said name it confidence. So now they'll have a column with all the values that they input in the confidence thing. Same with JOL. So it's pretty easy to mess with this stuff, take trials, and without much work, put a lot of functionality into them, and this stuff is already doing all the reaction time tracking and nice stuff you want. So that's a JOL thing that Tyson did. So this is, should we talk about this?
Really quickly to show periods.
Oh yeah, Force numeric. I'm going to switch it to Tyson's screen then. So Tyson's going to show you the code for Force numeric and see if we can.
So this is what Force numeric looks like in the.
Probably you can look at stream.
So that's in the code folder. There's this folder here called JavaScript, and then this collector thing. Down near the bottom, there's this force numeric function, and it's sort of labeled what is allowed on each line. So
can you make that bigger? Although, so are you watching the stream, Aaron? If you're on the stream, does it still show that? That's where it records as Tyson's full screen, but for me.
Easy?
Not really. Let's see. Is there any way I can just force it to be like, just look at Tyson? Show me nothing else.
How about that?
I can't see it as well here. Let's see if I can watch the stream at the same time as I am also part of the stream and incept myself. Let's see. Watch. Okay, so it's live. And there should be a link on YouTube that I can watch. Although that link's going to be behind time, right? Didn't we find out last time that YouTube is in the past? Let's see. It's probably also pushing the boundaries. Yeah, so YouTube is looking at Tyson's full screen and it's fine.
A little far behind me, though.
Actually, I can just here. I'll walk through the code on this end, Tyson,
Okay.
while you explain it, but so people in the room can actually see.
Okay.
So the place you go to look at this code is inside of the. Do it over here. Inside the code folder. See, I should turn it back to my screen for a second. So in the code folder, so go to collector, code, you have a folder called JavaScript. So these are all the scripts that run pretty much all the timing stuff and any interactive things that are happening on the page, they're happening in JavaScript. And there's a file called collector_1.0.0.js. This is the JavaScript. A lot of this was originally written by me and then rewritten by Adam.
I suppose we should
Blake?
be calling it like 1.0.1 and something.
Yeah, we should be. I mean, that's why I don't have version numbers generally, because I don't want to keep track of what's going on. But okay, so where's this happening, Tyson? Around what line are we looking
The
at?
added functions are at the bottom, so around line 370.
370. Wow, it's a lot of code in here. What's nice is for most stuff you want to do, you don't have to be in here. So
Right.
line 370, it's highlighting the hell out of it for me, but I'll say.
And we see this function that's sort of saying what's allowed, if keys within this range, whatever numeric code. And
Okay,
it's
give me
sort of
one
like-
second. I'm going to open this somewhere else that doesn't do that crazy highlighting, because that's going to drive me nuts. Like lots of things. Go to line 370. There we go. Okay, so what are we looking at here?
So it's labeled what's allowed here. So if you just take a line and comment that one out,
Wait, why 380?
well, so those two keys are the periods.
Oh, so the comment says comma, period, and minus on keypad,
Right.
and that's 190
yeah, I think,
and 110.
yeah, because there's a period, in the typing area, and then also by the keypad. So if you just comment out both of those, then periods aren't allowed.
So if we turn these off, basically add a comment is that in JavaScript. You do dash dash. That would tell it let them, or don't let them put commas, periods.
Yeah, so don't put the periods on the exception list of things to allow. Because basically what this function is doing is every time they hit a key, it checks and says, I'm going to reject this unless I match it with one of these values. And so if you pull off those values, it gets rejected and not added to the input.
This is actually exceptionally well commented for Tyson code.
This is not my code.
Okay, no wonder.
A couple lines up, I'm saying I got this from some website.
I was about to say Tyson is learning to comment his code.
No.
So what's this line here above it? 190, 188, 109 that's commented
includes
out.
Commas and minus sign.
So we're allowing.
So originally they also allowed commas and minus signs.
You didn't want to allow those.
And I didn't allow those, but I wanted to keep periods, so I just took a section of the code out.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So see, Tyson, if you would comment like this, I'd be very happy all the time.
The function's like twice as long.
Yeah, but I mean, there's not a someone's not counting the lines of the code. Okay, so what are we doing after this? What are we talking about? I've already forgotten. I have a problem.
Well, we can move on to the next trial thing. I'm just going to show how to pull off the periods.
Where did that go? So here's the next trial type.
Right. So perhaps I can talk about this one a bit.
So Tyson created a very, very pretty liquor trial type.
What?
Oh, bounce between the two.
Right. So this is a good staple to have for psychology research.
We should push that microphone closer to Tyson. Sharon, that's you.
Okay, but, maybe you can open the trial code for liquor.
I think this is the best way to have you orchestrate my movements on screen.
Dan's puppet.
I'm fine with that. Okay, so here we are. We're opening code. So what am I going to?
Perhaps, as we're developing in the future, it'd be good to have a section like this where you just describe how to use it. But the interesting columns for this are the procedure notes column, which normally we store text in, like for the instruct, and then a settings column. So let's take a look at the order file.
Which order file is this that we're opening?
And this is all trials.
Okay, so collector, experiment, procedure, all trials. Generally, add trials. We'll try to be good about adding them to the all trials so you can see. If you want to kind of know how things function, this is a good way to look at. Okay, here's how they did that.
Okay, so on the second row we've got the liquor trial type. And the first column that we should look at is the procedure notes one. All right, so if you'll see, near the end, I've got some pipe characters that are separating like so bad and so. In this,
Just drag this cell up so that we can see. Oh, is that not right? Oh, that's pretty good. Each other.
okay, so I'm using these pipes to sort of break apart the entries. So normally, if you just threw all of that into a div, it all has to show up together, but the pipes mark where I'm going to be breaking it off. And the first section is the question that's going to appear right at the top. But notice I have $Q and $answer, and then if you look at the actual output, it does not say Q and answer.
Actually, we can't leave the output until I've done it right. So.
Oh, I mean, just on the web page that you had loaded already.
Oh, okay, I thought you meant the
Yeah, I meant on just the browser. Okay, so now it says how good of a Q is funny for the answer bone. So it's doing a replacement of $Q with the Q of that. So you notice item is set to 2 there. So you can ask questions about Qs in something like this. And then after that, I have the labels for your Likert scale. So like on the left, you can have so bad floating over it versus so good on the right. And then you can have just 2 entries if you just want it on the left or the right. 3 will give you something in the center. But basically the only important thing is to separate it by the pipes. And then the more interesting column is the settings. I think that starts with a space because there's some weird thing with Excel where, does it?
Yeah, just start with space.
Right, so Excel didn't like starting things with a minus sign, but space doesn't break it, so totally fine. The notation here, the double colon means that I'm specifying a range. So here it's from -2 to 2, and the parentheses indicates the step size. So that if you look at the browser again, that's why we have, going by 0.5s. And probably the fastest way to override it, Ike, if you could go into the code for this trial again, and then start look like underneath the comment section. Okay, just create a variable like right now called settings. Or maybe I can just come over and do it on yours.
I had a quick question about the notation. When you said like referring to Q and answer, how does it know which one to go to?
So in the order file, the item was set to 2.
Okay, so it's that same row.
Yeah, so it's always referencing wherever the procedure file is always pointing at some stimuli, so it's always going to reference whatever stimuli we're pointing at.
Which just says if I don't have a settings variable, then create basically if you don't have a settings column. But if you do have a settings column, this settings variable gets created automatically because one of the functions will just find all your column headers and make variables like this. But say we typed in something more interesting for settings rather than just the range of -2 to 2. We could do A to F, for example. What's your browser? How do you get back to your browser on the Mac?
That's not Mac, it's Windows. It's just because the screen resolution is so crazy low.
I did. I think I didn't include the closing semicolon.
Oh yeah, I forgot the alts moved. I've just learned where they are. Stupid Mac keyboard does not have an alt. Yeah, I didn't actually add something.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, here. I should do this because it's super annoying to work on the Mac keyboard because it moves around the alt, the control keys, so all the shortcuts you want to use are different. I've just really learned to not look at the keyboard. Because the part didn't save. It's not saved. It's not the control key. That's the alt key.
Yeah.
So let's see. Okay, so there's alt tab. What happened here? It's just saving. It's still not going. Did a weird thing happen in that trial?
No.
This is what happens when you show you things that we just did. But let's see if we can recover here.
Yeah.
Tiny screen notification. No, do not open that. Advance. Yes, I can read. Word pair. Still the one we made.
Alright, we'll just do the line that I added then.
Broken it in a much more fundamental way. You've broken the heart of like the trials. Okay, there we go. We must have added something at the very top. So we're, I mean, we can just add settings anywhere, right?
Yeah, so just add a settings variable. And then I want to show the ways that you can specify what are the possible values. I added a lot of options here. So yeah.
Options, the being of
Alright, so now we've got A to F. And we can actually do a step size on that one. So if we go back and you put parentheses 2 after the F. Okay, so now we've got every other letter. And then you can actually mix and match. So if we add, I also want one to...
I told you the keyboard is a disaster.
All right.
The first hurdle I had.
Add 1 to 3 for me, please.
I'm like the Vanna White of keyboard use. Vanna keyboard?
Give me a 1.
Yeah. Do we have a 1? Oh, all the keys are different on the Mac.
All right. So you can add a variety of ranges, but the notation is just each range is separated by a comma, and within the range, the endpoints are separated by a double colon.
So assuming the logic of what Tyson just said, is this true, Tyson? I said like 2 to 5, comma, for some reason I'm skipping middle values and I'm saying 10 to 13.
Right, and you can have different step values for each one of them. You can repeat things, like if you want the number 1 to show up 8 times in a row, you can just do comma 1, comma 1, comma 1, that's fine.
And then if they show every other one, this is like insane. I don't know why you built this, Tyson.
Because I could.
2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, because it's alternating. This is madness. Okay, so I think what most people would probably do is this, right? 1 to 7.
Actually, if you want to just do a really simple thing, you can just put the number 7, and it will give you 1 to 7. You can do the letter D, and it'll give you A to D. But if you need more control, it's available.
So what's happening right here? Okay, we should explain to people why we're doing this. So usually the way this would work is you're messing with these trials, or you're messing with, you call 2, you say it's a Likert trial, and then in the notes you write, here's my question. So we can do the simplest case here. We'll say question about, and we see $Q. So ask a question about the Q. We want the options of good, best, and Colbert. So we give it stuff like this, and then we say, we save our file, because we want to see, let's do this on a 1 to 7 scale.
Well, probably
save it.
Case just to put 7 to really demonstrate how simple it is.
It can, yeah, so you can put a, and I guess put a 5, it'd do 1, 5, it assumes 1, okay. I still would put 1 to 7, because it makes me feel good. But okay, so the reason we're not doing it this way is the problem that you need to think about sometimes when you're messing with your files. You have to remember that we only load the files once at the very beginning. So when you hit login, we load all this stuff here. So the reason Tyson and I were in the code changing what the values of settings are is because if I just, so I made all these changes to my files. So I added, good, best, Colbert, 1 to 7. Even if I save this file, when I reload the web page, it's going to keep giving me the same thing. And the reason it's giving me the same thing is because it's not looking at the file that I just changed. So instead of having to go in there and change values on the file and then reload the whole experiment, what we are doing is just going directly to the code and sort of intercepting that we know it read a settings value from this column called settings. But instead of having to reload the whole thing, we just said just change what that value is. So if I wanted to show you 2 to 10, instead of having to reload the whole thing, I can just do this. But for you, what you're probably going to do is just say, okay, don't mess with the code. Instead, here are my options I made. But to see those changes, I have to reload the experiment. So I go back to the main page. I want to do condition 11 again. I log in. The enter should work.
That button's not a single button.
It should be somewhere. Well, okay, so we've got this trial. And now here are. So here's the way you usually edit. So we go from good to best to Colbert, asking about the dog. And the reason it says dog is because we put this variable Q in there. We could have put target.
Answer.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We dropped target. See, I need to stop thinking of Q pairs because I'm a cognitive psychology person. But again, if we made that change, we try to refresh the page, it's not going to be reflected until we reload the experiment. So just know whenever you make changes to your main files, so the procedure or the stimuli file, you have to reload the experiment to see those changes you're making because we only ever access those files at the beginning of the experiment. So all the other times when I'm saying look at current trial or look at previous trial or look at the session trials variable, I'm always looking at the thing that was saved into memory at the very beginning. So I've had lots of people come and say, I made these changes to my files, what's going on? And what's happening is that we haven't looked at the changes you've made yet. But once we look at them, it looks like this.
So you have those labels, good, best, and Colbert.
Yeah.
Does there always have to be 3?
You can have 2, and it'll do left and right. You can have just 1, and it'll just put on the left, which put range.
Okay, but you can't have more than that, so you can't anchor like every single point that you have.
No, underneath each point, the value will show up. But you can edit the code. It's just it doesn't have that option in it yet.
So if you want, say, strongly disagree, somewhat disagree,
Yeah.
like every single number or point on the Likert scale to be labeled. So right now it's 3, and whatever is the middle one will always just be in the middle. So if you have an even number of, so you get 1 to 6, there's no actual point in the middle, so the best will just be in between
Yeah.
2 little numbers.
So here I dropped the middle one for Veronica's sake. It looks like this. So now we look at our file. It's asking about question about answer, and we still have 1 to 7, but now we only have 2 other options. So it's either good or it's Colbert, and that's what it looks like. So this is kind of a simple or a demo of how you can mess with the files and have it do nice stuff for you, but the code that makes this happen is pretty long because
Right. I can walk you through it after. Right now, we just go to types later.
But I think for here, I mean, most people don't really even need to know this code. I mean, you could figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting things is just that's how you can put multiple text entries where you want text to show up in different places. Just just be prepared to separate them by a certain character, and the pipe is used regular text, so it's good for that.
So here we're gonna say it's Colbert. That's how much the bone is Colbert. Weird. Audio. My audio is muted, so you didn't hear it. So let's turn off that loud sound. Ah, yes. Super happy about that as the default audio. Is this your new one yet?
No,
that's a copy.
That's showing copy, and the next one, the trial type is called delay copy. So this is an easy demonstration of what JavaScript is.
Yeah, and here
specifically jQuery. So first you just see the cues, but then after 3 seconds, the answer pops up.
So you can see that again. So yeah, so it comes dog blank. You wait, and then you get the answer after a few seconds. So should we show the code and how this works?
This one's pretty simple. So this is meant to be like the simplest I do.
Okay, so code, trial types. This is delay queue, right?
Delay queue.
Or delay copy. Open it here. Actually, let's open it in AppTantic because that's prettier. There we go.
And so the notation for adding these sort of custom functions is a little bit strange. Like some of it you can't just Google because it's sort of built by a certain bit of script run right as soon as the trial loads. You basically anchor it to an object called the collector dot trial dot the lowercase name of your trial. So here it's delay copy because our trial type is delay copy, and we make that equal to a function, and then once delay copy loads, the JavaScript will say, oh hey, I have a function called delay copy. I'm going to run this now. You can do it simpler, like you can just tell the page to do something on load, but this just sort of makes sure that things get run in the correct order. Like make sure the collector timing functions are loaded before it actually tries to use the collector timer.
Yeah.
And then there's a function called, collector.timer, which you can pass it a number of seconds and tell it to run a function after that time, sort of like a set timeout, but more accurate. And I basically say after 3 seconds, find the first study right element and change its HTML to include the answer.
And so what's nice is you can do something like this. I'll just do the way I like to do it. Dot timer 3, run this function, and it's basically saying grab the thing that has study right on it, which is this here, and show it. So turn the HTML to answer. You can make this a variable number. So instead of 3, you can say start some PHP code, close the PHP, and we want to echo, some variable we have. So if it's in the procedure file, like if there's a settings column, or let's say you just call it delay, you have a column you set to delay, you give it some number, you can say echo whatever is dot delay, and that would know to look at the delay column for this and put that number in there. So whatever number you give it, it'll wait that many seconds. You can use decimal points, right? That's back. So if you put 0.5 seconds, you would delay 0.5 until it showed you the actual answer.
And if you are trying to use new columns this way, the way that they get turned into variables is something called camel case. So the first word is all lowercase, and then every word after that starts with an uppercase letter. So like procedure notes becomes lowercase procedure, capital N, and then the rest of
Yeah,
notes.
so you better call them timing values, or new values is the column name. Then the way you'd write it is new values. And the program's setting up these automatically for you. So, and this is only from the procedure file. So if you add another column, you call it, delay time. So you can write delay time as the value. You have a column called delay time. Or if you're on a post, you'd have post 1 delay time.
Even with post 1 delay time, the variable created will still be called delay.
So the program knows
in post trials.
It basically knows that both of these. It figures out which level you're on and says, okay, pull the value from the correct column there, and then just give me the camel case name. So it makes it really easy for you to just add another column and then use those values for stuff. So you don't have to even really pull in that much. You just say, okay, I know I named it delay time, and whether or not it's a post 1 or post 20 or a regular trial, all I have to type is $, and then you underscore, or you lowercase the first word, and then you start the second word with an uppercase or any other subsequent words. So if you had delay time value, even if it was like this, you would just have delay time value. So it knows to the first letter make a capital of every word except for the very first word. Oh, it's 4 o'clock. So Tyson, I'm going to put you in charge of talking about stuff.
Okay.
So if it goes off the rails, it's Tyson's fault. I'll be back shortly. I've got to go meet with Bob.
Is it pointing at my screen? Because I just want to use mine, because I know how to use this.
Okay, yeah, my computer's. I had to adapt to it, even though it is still Windows. This Mac does not like to be Windows. Alright, it's on Tyson's screen, although. Actually, just plug this into yours and everyone else can see it, because it doesn't.
Okay.
It's not going to affect anything I'm doing. So show people things, Tyson, and move the microphone near Tyson so he doesn't yell like I do. I didn't know you can hit 0.1, 0.2. I got different for scale. Logarithmic. As it approaches 1, you definitely go 0.8. Alright. Okie dokie.
It's just it shows up like
Oh.
that. So I don't know what's going on.
Well, then I will try and keep whatever I'm doing.
Or maybe we need to zoom out on his thing.
If you can figure that out, that'd be cool.
I don't know.
Okay, well, let's just skip ahead to the next custom trial I have. Which is, okay, so here's an example of something that doesn't require new JavaScript, but it has an example of custom scoring. So dog and the first 2 letters of the answer show up. We can type the rest of it, and we shall go take a look at that. So that was my test queue trial type, and this is an example of using a folder because it uses some custom scoring. So the trial shows up. So I guess it's either I can make it show up on the screen or on the projector, but not both. Would you guys rather that it was visible here?
Well, for people watching, it's probably better on
That's true.
AP is a weird on yours.
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's like zoomed in.
Yeah. It's zoomed in, but actually very blurry as well.
All right, well, the trial type is basically just copying of the test, and I basically just add in the right area, give me the substring of the answer, the first 2 letters, and that's why CA was showing up. But more interesting is the custom scoring. So I have some instructions of you absolutely need to have these 3 lines in your scoring file. So basically just if some variable called finding keys is set, then you're not actually trying to score something. It's actually the login page that's just trying to find out what columns to create in advance so that it can make sure that they're arranged nicely in order. It's actually fine if you get this incorrect. If you tell it that you need columns that you don't need, then you'll just get a bunch of blanks. And if you leave out a column that you actually are going to be recording, the program will just create that column in the middle of the experiment. But just for the sake of sort of labeling what your trial type does, it's good to accurately do it. Basically, the columns are exactly the standard ones, except for I also have this thing called response complete. So their normal response will just have the letters they typed in. So if they typed in T to finish the word cat, your response would only have the letter T. And in case you just want an easier comparison of what they typed in with the answer, I'm going to make a new column called response complete, which will have the 2 letters that were shown plus what they typed in. Basically how I do that is I have this variable that I create by taking the response and adding that same substring that I displayed before. and then I just make sure to include that in this data variable. So the data variable is what actually gets recorded. So if I have one of the keys is response complete, that's a column that's going to show up in the output. And I just set that column as equal to the substring plus what they typed in. And that's why later in the output, look at it. Okay, so right here are various columns for the response things, and here's our typical response column, and it's just recorded that I typed in T, but then under here, response complete, and it gives me the whole word that I was trying to form, which is cat. And then scoring is based off cat rather than just T being compared to cat. Okay.
What is going to change my resolution in the middle?
It looks fine from here, but then from everyone else in the Hangout, it looks like crazy green and
Really?
like that's what.
Oh, you're only seeing a chunk of my screen? Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to turn off screen sharing and then turn it back on. Because I bet you when you did full screen, it targeted the resolution I was at.
Mhm.
And then when I disconnected my monitor, the screen got bigger and it was still targeting like the corner.
Yeah, now it's normal.
Okay.
Goody. Okay, so then, Mikey, are you back for a while now?
Yeah, I'm good. Bob, I talked to the people downstairs earlier, so we had to go over a few things.
This is an example of a more complicated trial type, but basically, I'll just run you through it. So, have we seen this before? Funny? Yes, we have. So, what was the answer to this? It was bone or bones or something. We click next. This is a JOL, and so we just give it numbers, no letters, and then we're allowed to submit it after that. If we had decided, so if you refresh it, it does get restarted. So that's one of the problems of using really complicated trials is that if it refreshes, you lose a little bit of what they were saying before.
Although, so
But-
for generally, if you're worried about that, in the date, so we're keeping time on the page, but also we take a timestamp after every trial ends, so you can look at your output and compare how it'll say they were on this page for 5,400 milliseconds, but if the timestamp says, well, we hadn't seen them for 15 seconds, so you can probably assume either connection was really slow in the middle or they refreshed the page a few times.
Right, and we can actually make a refresh counter, which we can add by next week, so you can see whether they were refreshing. Generally, it's not too much of a problem. I mean, if they've got 30 of these trials, they're probably not changing their answer every single time.
Most people are generally just trying to finish the task.
But JavaScript here is helpful because one, it's responsive in that I can click something and make new content show up, but also I can have sort of different branching patterns. So if I were to say that this is a new queue, I click new, I get a different question here. So please guess what the answer will be. Okay. And then I get another JOL thing, so I can type that in. And then once again, I can submit it. Let's take a look at order file. So once again, this is an example of using pipes to separate different text entries. So the top question just shows up first. And then this was sort of the path that they took if they clicked old. So first what was the answer for that? And then their JOL question. So it's sort of different from the JOL trial type where the question is hard-coded in there. To change the question, you need to go into the file, the code file. But here I can control all the text content through the procedure notes column just by giving each entry a specific spot that I know where to expect it. And then if you change this, you don't have to worry about changing the code to make different questions show up.
We should comment too. So right now we're using procedure notes, but we might change that to a column called text because
yeah, you might want a notes column just for actual notes and a text column for actual text. That might change in the future.
So that might change it even by next week. So we'll tell you. But generally, I mean, the same stuff is going to happen. The columns just going to be named differently. And lots of the stuff is sort of just we made decisions a long time ago, or I made decisions a long time ago, and they just haven't changed yet. But we realize we're kind of right now we're in flux between updating it to be a lot easier to use and make a lot more sense, and throwing out all the old junk. It's just there because it's been there and we didn't get rid of it.
All right, so this is the actual trial that we just looked at. It would be a little complicated to explain what it's doing, but if you wanted to see an example of how to use, different stages of your trial, then it basically involves hiding them or setting the visibility to hidden for upcoming parts, and then as soon as they click a button, you make a function that says, oh, when that button gets clicked, find the next stage and show it so that they can start working on it. And then I also happen to set it up so that they're not allowed to change their answers. Like once they've clicked hold, they can't change their answer. Or once they submit an answer and they're trying to estimate how sure they are, they can't go back and change this. But that's stuff that you just sort of do. Like every time they click a button, change the color of the text to gray to sort of indicate that it's done. Disable the inputs inside there. Actually, for the inputs that I want to record, you wouldn't want to disable them because that would prevent them from actually getting submitted. So you wouldn't be able to record them. So I changed them to read only, which basically means they can't change it, but when you submit the form, carry that data with you. And then, since I have basically 5 different inputs, so there's the old new choice, and this is actually sort of a hidden radio button. So the Likert scale, you had the radio buttons. It's basically what this works. It's got a new format, a new visual look, but it's a radio button. And then you've got 4 text boxes underneath. And so the scoring, I just have a bunch of new columns, like old new choice, old confidence, their guess if they're doing something new confidence. I don't actually do any custom scoring. This is all just copied and pasted, but this is how you load columns you need.
Have you been talking about custom scoring yet? And so how
I did a little bit for my test queue trial type, which I don't know if you've seen. It's the one where it's like it shows cat or dog and then CA and they type in T.
Oh yeah.
And then the custom scoring says, oh well, if they typed in T, it's cat that they submitted, basically. And then I think that's the last new trial type that I made. No.
Awesome.
So if you guys want, we can go over making a trial type. If you guys just want to start from scratch and do some simple projects.
We should data stuff first.
Okay.
So I say this is actually a better idea than what we were doing before. Tyson, you should watch the stream on your computer, the live stream, and then I'll just do stuff on my computer. That way, because when I plug my monitor back in, when I plug that thing back in, it's gonna drive it crazy again. So if you just display the stream on your computer, that'll be on the projector, and then I'll just do stuff on my computer. So I'm gonna switch back to my screen.
Okay.
Okay, so if you look at my screen,
I
you
just
switch
thought
back.
doesn't like
What happened?
I see your screen.
Okay.
Screen is
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at dog now.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tyson is also gonna take some Tyson input, which I can just yell up in my phone. But I'll make this bigger so it's clear. Oh yeah, here I can show you the resizing too because I've got a proper monitor now. So here you can see set the radio size. So there it's in the center. As I drag, it tries to keep itself in the center of the screen. Very nice. But let's see. Do we have data from somebody right now?
I mean, if we just ran through it.
Run through. They said everyone do this actually. Can I put this up on the web real quick? Without getting login information. Oh, here, we'll run through it.
Well, it's in settings that you still have to set a password. So it's by default, there's no password to it, but that means that you're not allowed to use get data.
Okay, so I'll do this instead. I'm going to go to the code. I'll go to the data. So right now I'm going to just delete what's there. So let's start over. I'll leave this. Actually, what do I have to leave now? You added extra stuff. What can I delete?
What are you trying to delete? Why are you deleting stuff?
The data. We'll delete data, so we'll run 2 clean runs, and then we'll show the data what it looks like.
Okay. Delete the final questions file, the status files, demographics and then the output folder. Yeah, it's a little bit messy now that we have get data built into data.
Yeah, we'll make a way to have it do cool stuff.
Yep.
Okay, so what can I? That's it, right? What's images? That's probably.
That's for get data images.
Okay. We'll find a way to.
And experiment files you don't need, although experiment files aren't used by get data or anything, so it doesn't really do anything. They're the session stimuli files that sort of record what the trials variable was.
So okay, the experiment files. Basically, output is where all data is, right?
Yep.
So usually we'll just do output. Okay, we're gonna run through. What's a really simple condition?
I think the first one just says, look at the file. Okay, now look at this file.
But the one that's gonna record some data. So
Right, do 11 because they're all user timed, so they're pretty easy to go through.
Okay, so.
And that'll demonstrate all the new columns as well.
So I guess everyone can do the same on theirs, and they can see their input if they're doing it. I'm gonna log into my key because that's where I am. I'll pump the text up so it's easier to read. Oh, and yours is not a full screen either. Maybe we should just leave it. Well, for now we'll do this. So I put it there, advance, enter the answer. So here's a word pair. Okay, so I'm gonna guess a JOL again. I can't, but I can type 65.
And in the future, I think we'll make the forced numeric also and say 0 to 100 and don't let them type 1,000.
Yeah. But for now, it's just numbers. So at some point, we kind of, if your participant's typing 1,000 out of 100 scale, kind of want to throw them out anyway. Okay, question about the pair. I'm going to go with Colbert again. Answer. Audio. Funny Bone. Fail to copy and write Funny Man. But I don't think it's. I might be scoring this. The funny one, I guess, mad at him real quick. Oh, it's set up for 3 seconds. Oh, no, it's set up to full variable that I set. That's why it's not working. But we'll say pretend bone popped up because I didn't break it earlier. And I got it right. I copied correctly. And I'm reading a big passage of stuff. And I read really quickly. So I'm hitting next, and that's how well you can read the picture. I agree. That's the label. So usually you'd see it like this. But when I really jump the size up huge, it gets weird. But for now, it looks like this. So this is the feedback for the picture I saw. I'm trying to guess. I'm the MD Doom. I'm really close, not quite. But that's my guess. So here, this is an MC pick. There's a bunch of category labels. None of these labels are going to match up with what the correct answer is, but that's fine. I'm just going to miss it. But whatever I choose, I'm going to choose category 12 because it's the largest number. Dog, cat is what I'm going to guess. The answer, I got it correct. Awesome. Dog, cat. Dog, CA, and
Caper.
car. Cart. And then maybe, well, yeah, we'll say car.
R is good.
So, I forgot already. I've seen this word. Old seen the word before. What's the answer? Pear, I believe. Am I sure it's pear? No.
That's JOL.
JOL. Then I'm gonna say, how sure am I? 100% sure it was pear. Then I have some free recall. So let's say, what has happened so far in the experiment? I typed things. It was. I'm so. I'm doing some tasks here. Okay, this is how long it took me to understand it. Pretend I sat here and I read for a long time, so I'm a very confused participant. And then here's some questions. A lot of questions. So, it went smoothly. Yes, I've done this before. Actually, no, I haven't done this particular one before. How much fun from 1 to 7? 7, usually. Is there anything else? Watching which of the following problems they have. None of these problems. I'm going to say everything ran smoothly. And then it's going to say thanks. Okay, so that's a clean run. One participant goes through it. And should I just show get data or should I show them?
Yeah, you can do condition 1. I think that was just like 4 instructions, and then you're done.
Okay, so pretend another person comes in, they log into condition 1. Same question, say yes. Tutorial probably woefully out of date right now, but we'll put somebody on the job for fixing it. So I'm a really quick reader. So I lied there. Okay, so we should show people what one clean run looks like, right? So if we go to the outputs, we show the raw data and we'll show how to get all your data. Which is the one that we did first? We did this one first. So the data files are in the, if you go into your data folder, there's a folder called output. Inside of that output folder, it stores all the output for every person who's run and for every session they've run. So far, we've only talked about experiments that last one session, but it's possible for experiments to be 2 or 3 session experiments. We'll show you that stuff next week. But for the first one, you can see the formatting of the files is. I'm just going to change here. I'm going to change my resolution. This is messing things up here. Change my screen resolution to something more manageable. And then we'll probably have to turn the Hangout on, then off again. I don't know what's happening. Undo. Keep those changes. Does that look better at all on the screen? Like, to see what I'm doing? Since it's still covered. Actually, pass me the projector thing, guys, and I'll plug that back in. Which means I'm going to turn the screen off again. And so if anyone's watching, if it's confusing, is that I'm projecting my screen and also sending this thing. That's the second time we done it that way. Resolution should be changing. Screen share off, screen share on. Aaron's that looking better? Like more human readable what I'm doing here? Yes-ish. Ish, okay, I'll take an ish. Come on, Mac. Work with me here. There we go. Okay, so here are the output files. So they're formatted in this name. So it says output underscore session and whatever session they're on underscore whatever their username is. And at the end, we generate a random ID for every single person. For every single time they log in, we generate a random ID. So this is the random ID I got. And these are, they're .txt files, but like almost every .txt we have, they should be opened in Excel. They're just spreadsheets, essentially. So here's what your output actually looks like. And again, like all the stuff we talk about, the first row is always the header. So this is the stuff that actually tells you what's going to come in each of these cells. And I guess a good practice if you're in Excel is this. You go to data and say, what is the filter? So this is a really nice tool that I showed some people that they didn't realize they could do. If you go to Excel data filters, that allows you to have these little drop downs. You can say sort Z to A, sort A to Z by that column. And what you'll see is here's what we have. So swap the columns. The first one is username. So you can see so the reason there's so many entries is that I have an entry for every single trial they do. So here are the trial numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. You get the idea. And for each trial that happens in the experiment, I record the user who did this, the ID they had at the time, the name of the experiment they were actually running in. This is why it's really helpful to actually, if you go into settings, to not just leave this as collector. If you name it, whatever, failed retrieval experiment 1, in 2 years you open this file and every line, yeah, that might mean nothing to you, but that's why. So we go to the condition stuff. So we have the condition description. That's also recorded with every single line of data. So whatever condition they were in, every line of data you can tie it back to. This is the description. This is what I told myself this condition was about. Same as the condition notes. So we have description and notes because sometimes I'd want to kind of label like, okay, here's 3 different conditions that are just counterbalance orders, but essentially they all mean the same thing to me. So I want to label them all, male faces or failed retrieval, no filler items. And then the condition notes, I can make notes to myself, a more detailed description of here's what the experiment's doing, here's how many items go into it and stuff like that. So I intended it to be used that way, but generally these are just for your own use. So however you find them useful, use them. But just know that what becomes nice here is that if you have 4 different conditions, let's say you have an experiment with 8 conditions, and so that you have 8 lines in your conditions file, but essentially there's really 4 conditions with each having 2 counterbalance orders. You could just name the pairs the same thing, so they'd all have the same. If conditions 1 and 2 are just counterbalances of each other, you can name both the descriptions condition A, and then you can filter. Right now we only have 1, but if I grab this, I can say examples of all presentations. Let's say there were 3 different condition numbers that corresponded to that description, and I can hit that, and it would show me just those lines of data.
So filtering that trial type is handy. You just want to cut out the instructions.
Yeah, so if okay, the first 3 trials are instructions, then I can say turn those off. So now here's conditions 4 or 5. And what we're showing you right now is for one person's data file, but I'm going to show you a little tool that'll pull all the data from all the people who've ran it into one big file like this for you. But I think it's easier to just talk about one file at a time. So here's some stuff you might care about. So here's the date. So we timestamp the exact time this trial started. So it's in a weird format here. It's the year, the month, the day, and I think this is the time code of the server, right, Tyson?
Yep.
So people are on different, you won't know it's 7 o'clock where they're at because it's not saying 7 o'clock, East Coast or 4 o'clock West Coast. It's just saying the server, wherever the server was, this is the time on the server. And here's a column here, time diff. This is the one I was talking about earlier. So this is the server saying, this is how many seconds since we last saw them come back from a trial. So then at the end of every trial, we take a timestamp, and the server says, what time is it right now on the server? And when a trial ends, it says, okay, when was the last time we saw them in the trial? And that's what this time diff column is.
And that includes all the post trials. So like test, JOL, that's all one diff.
Yeah, so basically it treats everything that happens in trial 1, including all the different post levels, as when you're done with everything that was in trial 1, take a timestamp. So mark that it's this time, and then when you're done with everything in trial 2, tell us what the difference is. How long has it been since we marked trial 1, and so on. So this is really good if you have a sequence of, let's say, they're studying 50 items. Generally, these time diffs will be almost identical because there's a little bit of latency from them sending data to your server and it coming back. But if you're looking down and let's say you have 5-second study trials and they're all 5.2, 5.3, 5.1, and then one of them is 25, you could say something went weird with their internet, or they refreshed the page. Sometimes it's a sign that they went off of the page. So if you're in the browser, lots of browsers do this. If there's JavaScript running here that's keeping time, and I go and I start looking at some other page, lots of times the JavaScript on the page, on the tab you were looking at, stops running because you're not on that tab. So if someone goes away from your experiment and starts doing other stuff, it may not show in the actual timer values, which will show you like the reaction time because that's using JavaScript. But this time diff will say, well, even if they did something weird on their computer, the server hasn't seen them for 5 minutes, so something's strange. So that's usually a good place to kind of just spot check for like, this all seems appropriate. And here's the condition number. So again, if the numbers are meaningful to you, that's helpful to tie data together. So this is all the condition stuff. Basically, any column that is in conditions will be reported here. Although conditions isn't like the other file in that you can't add extra columns to conditions and have them automatically reported here. So just use the notes and procedure But in stimuli, so here it says stimuli asterisk Q. So that means this is the Q that was assigned for this trial number they're on. Here's the target that was assigned.
Answer.
Or answer. Yeah, I need to get away from Q target. Yeah. I think that's why I had target there initially, because my head says Q target. Because I do lots of word pair studies. I know this is broken. I'm trying to fix this in. Okay, so back to 100. So here's the answer associated with this one. Here's the shuffle code that we gave it. Here's the stimuli notes that we gave it. If we had a shuffle 2 column, that would also be reported. So you get the idea. Basically, anything that's in the stimuli column or any cell that exists for that row in the stimuli will be recorded every time that stimuli is used. And then we can look at the same for procedure. So the item, the trial type, the timing value. So here it sets a user. The post 1 trial type, the post 1 timing, the procedure notes, the shuffle. So everyone's recorded. So we know here we can say, okay, we referenced column 4. What ended up being in column 4 of the stimuli was funny bone. It was displayed as a copy trial. The timing was user timed. And again, you can add columns to this stuff. Adding columns is really good in your analysis. So if we're looking back at the files that created these things, so let's look at condition 11, which is experiment, procedure, it's all trial testing.
Yeah.
That might be open already. Oh, there it is. So what makes it really useful is if you have something like this. Let's say we have I want like phase, and we'll call these all study phase. So you know the first 10 items are study, and then the last we'll call them tests. So doing stuff like this will make your life worlds easier. And that when you think about from the beginning, when you're creating these files, think about how am I going to do this data analysis later? Like how am I going to, what types of comparisons do I want to make? What types of things do I want to look at? What information could be helpful in the analysis? So here, by including these, now later I can say, you know, I'll have a column that will say, put it here, pretend like we had created it. We'll just change settings to override it. And this is bad practice. So there would be a column called phase, and every single cell would either be a study or a test. And we could tell Excel, we could say, okay, go to phase and only show me the test phase items. And then it would select those trials that were originally labeled as test items. Or, you know, you can break things up into thirds, like this was studied first third, second third, last third. So in your test phase, you know, if you want to later be able to recreate how they do on the first block of items versus the last block of items, if you think ahead of time, looking at your procedure file, you'd call, you know, block 1 test, oops, block 1 test, copy that here. So we can even break our tests into like first and second half, block 2 test. So anything that you think could later be useful, I would bake that stuff into the files because it'll just make your life a lot easier. Instead of having to go back and go to Excel and say, you know, if the trial number is between this and this, give it this label. You can just ahead of time say, okay, I know these are the first tested things, so label them now, and then later I can look at them separately. So here we get to the responses. So this is the stuff that's actually recorded by the experiment. So all the columns I've shown you right up to this point should be not surprising because those are literally like, you know, we put those into files earlier and now we got that stuff back. This stuff is what the program is actually going to report to you. So this is the data you can get from it. So we give you the accuracy. What this is we compare. So if you look at response means these are all responses that were given. And then we do that little asterisk which says, okay, which value are we looking at? So there's actually a response column. So response asterisk response means look at all the responses that are stored and what's stored for the response value. So here they typed R is what they typed. Here they typed pair. Here they typed, I typed things. It was easy. I'm so smart. So that was my free recall there. So if we look at pair, what we have is we have a value for accuracy. That number 80 is saying how matched is the word pair to the answer, which was pair. I said matched 80. It should be lowercasing,
I
right?
think
Oh, does yours not lowercase? Your scoring?
no, I think it's what trial type is that?
That's the one that you made.
Yeah, I think that one's because I just copied and pasted from my scoring for the queued one. So it's actually thinking that you typed in PA pair because it's appending something. So
Let's do
fix in
this.
order.
Okay, so this is actually a good reason, like good point to make. Test when you make scoring files. Test that stuff is scoring as you want it to, because I've seen a lot of people go through and create a big complicated thing, and not test that scoring is working, and they make their own scoring or they mess with the scoring file, and then in the end they realize none of it got recorded or it's not scoring the way they want it to, and they have to go back and do it by hand. I've got another good way to filter. If you go to, let's say we look at certain trial types. Usually this is we have a bunch of study, then a bunch of tests. You can just go to procedure trial type and say, just show me the copy trials. And there's a copy trial. Just show me the, obviously the copy, the delay copy, and the test trials. There's that. Oh yeah. Okay. Full brightness. So let's look at one that scores the way you expect to. Test. Okay, test. They typed for the response. They said, "Oh, did I not type a response?" Please have typed a response. There we go. I typed cat. So cat was what I said. The response was the accuracy is 100, and that accuracy is based off of comparing the response cat to the answer, what was set as the answer in the stimuli. So it's 100% match. So you have that accuracy just tells you this is the percent match between two things. But more important, I think, for us meaningful is we have lenient accuracy and strict accuracy. So the program in the scoring file is doing this for us. So lenient accuracy is saying we had set in the settings you can have a criteria saying how close does this match have to be counted as correct. So in the settings we set it as 75, and this is saying is the accuracy score greater than 75? If it is, give it a 1, so it gets a lenient accuracy of 1. And strict says is it exactly the answer we wanted? So did you type the exact correct answer? Give a 1 for yes, a 0 for no. So here we get 1, 1, because we have 100. I think is there a case where we're gonna have like a 75%?
The old new has an accuracy of 80%.
Oh, that's still gonna give us a number that is pretty good. Let's see. Okay, here's a 66%. This is the car, I think. So test Q. So that was the one where it was CA, and I had to type. I was supposed to type cat. So if you look, the response I gave was car because I added the R and Tyson figured it out. So I say, okay, response complete car, and the scoring for this one says compare the complete response to the answer. So here the answer was cat. So I'm 66% matched cat, and that 66% match gives me a lenient accuracy of 0, strict accuracy of 0. Oh, here's the one. So I typed, what is it, pair?
But it's trying to score for.
It's trying to score pop hair.
Because I have weird custom scoring involved in this one.
Okay, so we'll pretend this is the regular one, and it's saying how close is pop hair? It's very weird. You should just take the highest match, Tyson. Change to pair. It'll say what's the comparison. So you can see they're very similar, 80% similar, and you can look at the scoring, and the way it works is that it ends up giving a lenient accuracy of correct because it says, oh, this is 75% of the string. This is more than 75% correct of what I expected, but it gets a strict accuracy of 0 because it didn't exactly match what was expected of the input. Here's all the values you might care about. So like response time, RT. You can see each of these trials says this is exactly how long you're on the trial. And the way the timing works is when the trial loads, we hide everything. Once it's done loading, so if there's an image, you don't have to worry about it, accounting for that. The image loading time was factored in. It's not factored in into the timing. It's literally, it loads the entire page hidden from you, and then it unhides it and takes a timestamp. And then when the timer runs out or when you hit submit, it hides it again and then takes another timestamp and says, what's the difference in timing? So these response times are, at this point, they're more accurate than your monitor is. So we're giving you down to exactly when we told the computer show the thing and then when we told it stop showing it. But you have to factor in that the computer can say stop showing this, but because the monitors are 60 hertz, that means they refresh every 16 milliseconds. So this timing, there's a little bit of fudge factor into this, but it's kind of, basically the monitor is the bottleneck at this point and how accurate we can be in that. We can tell it stop showing right now, but if the monitor's not going to refresh for another 15 milliseconds, then it ends up being a little bit longer than we expected. But generally, this is really pretty accurate timing. And so this is things showed up, things stopped showing up. That's the timer we're giving you. RT key, this is saying how long after the thing showed up until they press the key. So if they don't press the key, it reports no press. It just means, okay, there was no key press. So if for some reason, they didn't start typing anything, it'll show no press. RT last is what's the time since we unhit everything until the last time they press the key. So this is usually good if you have things like computer time trials. So say you give them 8 seconds to type something into a test box. If the first key press is at 6 seconds and the last key press is like 770 and they give you something that's the beginning of the answer, basically they ran out of time, like they started typing and it stopped, or they ran out of time, depending on how close the RT last is. What other stuff did we give them? Those are the main ones.
For the lenient thing.
Yeah.
So it's right now it's set to like above 88%.
It's set to 75 right now.
So if they put in like hair and spelled, but
PARE.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
So it's like different.
Spelled it up there.
Yeah.
Like that would still be counted as correct regardless of how short the word is.
It just depends on the percent match. Like that's the accuracy scoring we're doing. Is just saying percent match of the string they typed into the response versus the string that it's supposed to be. And whatever, if that number is above 75, they get correct. And you can change the number. Like you can make it more stringent. So if you go,
Yeah, you have custom scoring available now. So for your trial type, you can make. Oh no, the accuracy is 40%. That's all you need.
so this is where it's happening. In settings.php, there's a lenient criteria of 75. Change that number to whatever you want, and it'll use that criteria. Should we show people get data? So I'm going to show get data, and then the most important thing is pivot tables, which are. So how do I get to get data now, Tyson? Because you're the.
So it's the root, and then use capital D data.
Okay, so wherever folder you're on, so here, this can be your web server. You just type / at the end of your web page, data. So you want to see your data. Does it still download to the server?
Oh,
Or do I have to set a password?
yeah, the thing is you have to set a password to enable it. So
Okay.
by default, the password's not set because this should be something that you're only using if you're aware of it. But in settings, there's an option to set a password.
So at the bottom, we can just say, Mikey, make better passwords people. So this is what happened. We should send a notice telling them.
Right, to go to settings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like a weird hard fail. Okay, so yeah, so you have to set a password. When you do, it says welcome to get data. So if there's no password set, it just says you can't use it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The default is we don't want anyone on the web to be able to just browse around at your data. If we didn't password protect this in some way, anyone will be able to just go on there and download stuff or look at what you have.
You said it's in settings.
Yeah, so it should tell you that. It will. It will tell you that.
And it's not by itself super secure. So if you have sensitive stuff, just don't allow get data. Just keep everything local. If you need the data, just download it all.
Yeah, so I guess we should always make that point that this stuff is not using, there's no encryption in this, so the only reason there's not encryption is because it's a little bit more expensive to buy a server that will encrypt stuff, but if you need to use if you need to collect sensitive data, you can pay a little bit more for a server that enables HTTPS, and then you should just drag this folder in as you normally would, and it will run the same way, but the difference is that you get this little like green lock icon here, which just means that it's encrypting things between you and the server. And if you are really afraid, you're collecting really sensitive data, what we tell you is don't turn on get data on your computer. Instead, log into your server, put all the data, grab the output folder and put it in your local copy of data, and then run get data there. But here's what happens when you go to get data. So I go to /data. If there's no password, it doesn't let me do anything. If there is a password, I enter it and I get this screen. And so walk me through what's going on here, Tyson. What's showing up here?
So the first area, top left, you can control which files you're going to be pulling data from. The main one that we were just looking at is experiments. But if you ask demographics, you can select those. The final questions are the questions that are like, did your browser run smoothly? If you have different names for your experiments, you can filter there. And then here we see that, the conditions available are 1 and 11. Those are the two that Mikey just did, so you can choose to grab only one condition at a time. And then probably the interesting part for the main menu settings is the file type. TXT or CSV, that's actually downloading file. Browser is like preview mode. So if you use browser and then click get data, you'll actually open in a new tab, and you'll see all of it in your browser without actually downloading it. So it's kind of good to make sure that you're selecting the data that you expect.
I have a question about the password protection. So could they just type in the URL /data/subjects? And
No, we
actually
have an
download
HD
themselves?
access that blocks it.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as you don't delete this file here. So inside of collector, there's data, this file .ht access. This stops them from directly getting to
to
it.
the directory.
Yeah. So let's see if I can even try. To do this right.
Like if you try and go like final questions data.txt.
So that's what happens. So I tried to go directly to the output folder to look at what's in there, and it says forbidden. You don't have permission to go here. So get data is the kosher way to do this.
New.
Yeah. So before people used to be able to just grab data. I mean, if they knew enough about the program, they could. But now they can't even.
So I would just use it if I didn't want to download the whole file. I just want to take a look at one subject's data. I would just do it from the browser directly like that.
So now with get data, what you could do is this: okay, so I'm here and I say I want to look at one person. I want to look at how Mikey's doing. I can just go to get data and say, okay, turn off all the IDs. Now turn on just that one person, and then browser and say get data, and now that's just the data for that person. But so this stuff is just showing you preview stuff. This is less interesting for what we want to do as far as when you run a real experiment, you want to get all the data. You're not going to do it all in the browser. You want to go into Excel.
Maybe
SPSS.
you can do like a bad run and do a complete run, and they'll show you the tags.
Okay, so here's another thing. So get data will show you, it'll separate some of the data for you to kind of save you headache. So let's say you had a participant who's like, okay, he's lazy. Logs in as lazy. He says, okay, instructions, and his first thing is like, okay, I can't read. I don't think so. He's not reading anything. He gets it right. Dog, cat, and he's like, I'm done with this experiment. He turns it off. So now in your data, when you look, so you say enter the password. Oh, why is lazy getting good ID, Tyson?
I don't know. I'll look at it.
So we'll look at it. So usually what will happen, there'll be a thing called bad ID, and lazy would be down there, and you can, by default, the bad IDs are turned off. So that just tells it, hey, this person, for some reason, didn't have a clean run. So a clean run is they did every part of the experiment, and they got all the way to the end, and they only logged in one time. And if they didn't get that, then we'll kind of separate them out and say, okay, here's some other people. You can look at their data if you want, but by default, we say, okay, don't include them in the grab. So usually what you do is you say, grab all the good IDs. We'll turn off lazy for now because it should have been detected as bad. We'll figure out why it's not happening.
Yeah.
And we'll say, give me a CSV file or a .txt. It's the same thing. And then we say, get data. And instead of saving, we'll just open it. Here's what it looks like. So it's very similar to when we're looking at the individual the individual outputs, but now it's everybody's output. So here we have, again, first thing I like to do is just say the data and turn on filters. So now we have the experiment. There's a username. There's the ID they had. That's the experiment they were actually in. Here's the session they were on. Here's the trial. The date, the time diff. So all the same columns are here. They're all aligned for every participant, and you have all of them. So if there were, this is a really short, like we're showing you 10 trials with 2 different people, but this file will get pretty long. Like, you run something with 150 trials in it, you run 90 people, you're looking at 2,000 lines of data. And what you want to do is make some sense out of this stuff. So I'm going to show you one of the greatest tools to use. So usually raw data, I'm only looking at it to like spot check stuff. So let's say I want to say, let's look at the test trials for now. So I want to go to experiment underscore procedure trial types. Because I have the filters on, I get these little triangles. I can click there and say, okay, let's look at the test trials. Let's say for some reason I think maybe people didn't do them. I say look at test only. Oh, so the other person doesn't have a test, which is kind of weird. So it'll show me only the participants who have them. So here only Mikey has a test. Look at test, and we can look at what they type. So it's a look at the response. Where is it? Did I not type response in this test? Oh, there it is. The response is cat. Okay, they typed cat. Here's how long it took them. These times make sense. Usually you'll have tons of trials, tons of participants. But the most interesting thing to do with this file, so right now I'm kind of showing you a weird use case, but here's what I almost always do with this file. I first put on data filters and then say, grab everything I have and insert a pivot table. So do it on a new worksheet. Oh man, should I change my resolution because this is going to be a disaster? I'm going to disconnect. No, I'll try to stick with this. Okay. So if you had a proper monitor, this would look a lot better. So you click on this, pivot tables, and this is the way to tell Excel, okay, select data for me. So there's rows and columns just like any other table, and some values you're looking at, and then you can filter your data in different ways. So lots of times you can do is say, okay, look at username, put username in rows. Now these are all the users I have. So however many files you had, it just collapses by sort everybody of this username into every unique username gets its own cell here. So it's the usernames, and I want to see differences for each trial type. So go to procedure trial type. There's a trial type. So this username had this trial type. Here are all the trial types. Now I want to see, let's say, what's our average reaction time for these trial types. So I can go to response reaction time as the value I want to look at. And I can, so right now it says counts. All this means is count how many reaction times there are for this user and this file type. So Mikey has 1 every 2 reaction times. This person has 8 for instructions. So let's say I want to take an average instead of, oh, is it going to give me a weird thing if I average by 1? Let's see. So I click on value here and I say settings, change it to an average value. So now I can see, okay, this person had this reaction time, so the average is 0.199. We'll pretend like there's more than one trial that's going to each of these averages. Okay, so you look at instruct. So this person had 8 instruct trials, and their average time is 1431, so 1.43 seconds is how long they took on each trial type. And where this becomes really useful is if you have a very big data file. So I'm going to show you another file. Let's see, where can I pull data from? I'll grab Spinfish. I'm just going to show you one of my projects and how you can use. Here's all data. This is what this ends up looking like. So I downloaded the file from the server, and I just saved it as an Excel file. So here I'll show you the raw output, and I'll mess with it. So you get output that looks something like this. The names are a little different right now because we've updated Get Data to do fancier stuff for us. But the principle is the same. So we've got, here's a bunch of people. I grab this and I say, okay, insert a pivot table somewhere. Let me save this as a different file so I don't overwrite my real data file. Save as computer desktop. Messing with data. So now I've created a pivot table. So let's say now the username thing becomes a lot more useful. So I call it user ID here, but same idea. So here I can see these are all the usernames that were in my experiment. So I can initially just go through and get a count of how many people did this. So here I collected a lot of data. So this is 200 and something people here. You can see not all these values are correct. So like dollars for a name and blank and let's do something else. We'll just filter those out for now. So let's say I do that. I say, okay, turn off. Oh man, it's going to make me scroll forever. Let's just pretend I know these people are bad. Turn off these people. So, adults name and blank. So I can turn people off. I can do stuff like, okay, usually I don't really care so much about the users. I usually care more about the manipulation of them. So let's say I want to grab, where'd we go? Which trial type is here? Oh man, is this really old data? It doesn't have trial type?
It's there.
There we go, trial type. So I want to look at trial types. So I have read picks and test picks. So those are the trial types I use, and I want to look at the lenient scoring for those things. So this is a count. This is just saying this is how many times you had this. Not so interesting, but I can say show me the average. So read pick, the lenient score is 0, makes sense, right? Because they're not responding to anything, they're just looking. So I can just say, okay, I don't care about those. Those go away. Now here's only the test pick. I can also turn off the blanks because they don't show me the blanks. So here I've got an average for everyone who did test picks in this experiment. Not so useful, but I've got little codes in here built for myself. So let's see. Where's your files info? Okay, so here's scheduling. So I'll do scheduling. So scheduling is a column that had some values, so I made this column so I can use it. So now it broke down my data. So for all the test pick trials, it's saying show me blocked. So every line that had blocked in it, show me the average for those. Every line that had interleaved, show me those. I can do stuff like, okay, well, how long did it take them on each of those? So I can drag that out and say, where's the reaction time? I removed everything. This data is super old. There's RT.
So using pivot tables ultimately to look at your data is the reason why when you're setting up your procedure and stimuli files, you really want to make sure you label everything any way that you might possibly ever want to look at your data.
Yeah, because it'll make your life so much easier if you can just grab a column that's called like block 1, and you can just say, okay, show me. So let's pretend, what do I have? I swear I had some data that's better formatted for this stuff. Here's my APS data. This is probably better. That's APS. Oh god, where is it? APS data. Let's see something here. Okay, so this is probably a better data file to look at. Yeah, this is the stuff we just did for APS. Okay, so I went from show something here. Here's some pivot tables. I can say go back up. So here I have a pivot table. I put username in as on the left, so I want to see for each user. And I'm filtering by phase. So here I'm looking at only the test phase, so I had a column for phase. Then I say just show me test phase items, because those are the ones I care about. Inside of my order notes, you see I had written, inside my order notes I have what type of trial this is. So this is within subjects design. So for each line inside my order notes, I had a thing that said right, study only, or wrong. So I'd labeled all the trials that way. And then I have the responses, and I put all these things together, and I get a table like this. So if I don't care about username, I just want to collapse across the whole group. So the group that was labeled right, 91%, study only, 68%, wrong, 74%. Let's say I want to break it down a different way. I want to do Reaction time, I just changed from response. Let's say show me how fast each of these groups went. And I changed the reaction time and said, okay, show me the average value. There's the average value. The group that was right did in 4.2 seconds. Study only, 5.2. Wrong, 4.8 seconds. So it makes it really, really easy to look at your data in a bunch of ways without almost any work. So if I can do that same thing, I can say, okay, there's an RT time, and I want to look at the study phase item. So I pick study phase, and now there's the time in the study phase, so 8 seconds, 1300, 8 seconds. If I want to look at, let's say, if I think for some reason there was more internet connectivity problems with one, I could say, look at the worst time diff. Should be the top right. Did I not put in time diff? It should be there. Well, it's not there now, but it is in the newer versions. So I think what are the other stuff we want to show people? So, okay, the initial phase they were in. And we're
So
looking at the
phase is
test
something
items.
that's not automatically built in to
But I
kind of
use
the
it all
default
over the place.
templates, but you should almost always be using creating your own test column,
Yeah.
phase column.
Yeah, especially if you have like test trials during your study phase, you would want to
Yeah,
have a way to separate those out.
I mean, what you could do, so here's the annoying way to do it, is that you, after the fact, you put trial up here as one of these filters that you're excluding by, and then you say, you click this thing, and you say, okay, select multiple trials, so I want only trials, and sit here and select all the trials you want, like these trial numbers. But if you have something like phase, it makes it a million times easier. Just give me the study phase item, give me the test phase items. If you ever have a test that you think there could be like things happening differently at the beginning or the end of the order or the test, you say, break it into blocks of 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you like. Break into first half, second half, and that stuff will just make your life worlds easier. I don't know, is there anything else we talked about with pivot table? I feel like we
maybe
need
with
real
pivot
data to show people
tables,
stuff.
one of the things that is really useful is you can use the pivot table to construct a table that you can then export to SPSS. So an SPSS friendly format by putting all the usernames kind of as the rows, and then selecting whatever numbers you want. And then you can kind of copy and paste that into kind of a clean table or like a new sheet on your Excel, and then use that for SPSS.
So here I've got, okay, so Veronica's saying, let's say we want to look at SPSS, you need per participant, so we put username as the row, so those are all the users we have. The columns we want to look at, we have, where's info, phase. So there's phase, okay, we want to have, let's filter by phase, and we'll only look at the test phase. And now we want to look at which columns. It was in my procedure notes, so our order notes, it's called procedure notes now. There's the columns right, study only, and wrong. Those are the 3 different labels I had for trials. And now I want to look at their strict accuracy. And right now it's doing counts, but we're going to change that to an average. So we say, show me the average strict accuracy. So this pretty much as is right here is ready to go to SPSS. Each of these rows is a person. Each of these cells is an average of all the trials that were in this, that were labeled in this way. And it'll even tell you at the bottom, so if you want to just look like, if your means are completely flat, there's probably nothing going to happen in SPSS. But here you're saying, hey, look at, the group that was labeled right, or the trials that were labeled right, they're getting right at 87%. The trials that were study, they're getting at 66. The other trials are getting at 72. So usually what you do is just grab all this table here. What I like to do is do this. Grab this table, make a new sheet. So you can see I have one right there. I'll show you this. And then you just paste all the values. So now you have user, right, study, wrong. You can send this You can even just open this Excel spreadsheet in SPSS and say use this sheet I've created in it. So that's why I always have in my stuff I have a sheet called SPSS, and I keep working in Excel, and then I just load the file in SPSS. Say look at the SPSS sheet. SPSS knows to look in the top over header, so it labels the things correctly. So it's like, okay, this is the user. These are their scores for each of these within subjects conditions. You can do a between subjects code and have it do 1 or 0 after. And this stuff just goes right into SPSS, and then you can keep working in Excel. And it makes it really easy to refactor. So like right here, I was looking at one thing, so I'm looking at test phase performance. But if for some reason I decide, where's that picture? There it is. So let's say I have a question like, oh, maybe I want to look at the study phase. So I can just go up here, grab this, say study phase. All the numbers change. There were no study only in the study phase. And I can just grab the same data, copy it over, make a new sheet called SPSS study phase data, open an SPSS, they look at the study phase data, run the same analysis. It's especially useful if you're in SPSS and you say your syntax. You can, stuff formatted the same way, you literally just say run that syntax on this data again, and you get, more output. So pivot tables will make your life worlds easier. Use them, and you don't have to combine data. You can also filter by, at least in the new version, so we're not showing you as much, because the data I'm showing you is from older versions of the program, but in the one that runs right now, where's that data? The data folder. Outputs. Oh, that's right, I didn't save it, I just opened it in Excel, so I think it's this one. So you can even filter by more stuff. Oh, wait, we didn't select that, right, Tyson? Let's see. Okay, so run to get data again, resend.
But I fixed the bug that was causing some of the.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Right. So like currently you actually can't select a lot of columns. So you just go into the scan file. So in data scan.php.
Actually, we'll fix it next week and just show people, because this is pretty much time. We'll show people the new stuff.
It's like a one-word fix.
Well, because I'm gonna forget to do it later.
What?
Because I've messed with it. Well, I guess I can. Okay, where is this? Selector. Data.
Scan. And then look at line 62.
Okay, 62.
Take a look like this. Today just if is not set. Password. Right for the count, yeah, right there.
Yes.
So is not set, yeah.
What's not set?
Post password.
Oh god, I can't type. Or
yeah, that should.
It's not happy about that.
So close the parentheses after the use set.
Should not decode people. Okay.
There, you get
There
your
we
flag
go.
ID.
Yeah, so usually this is what happens when things don't run. It says, hey, that person was lazy, you don't include them.
And if you scroll to the right, you'll see specifically what they're flagged for.
So they didn't do final questions, they didn't end. So generally this person is like, if it says they didn't do final questions and they don't have a status end, that means they didn't get to the end of the experiment, so their data is probably trash anyway, so throw them out. The only time you really care is if for some reason you have a manipulation that's happening early in that's not affected by stuff you're doing later, that you can look at that data, try to recover something of use from them. Oh yeah, so that seemed to fix a lot of stuff. So now look at this. So we've got all these options, like which columns to include. You can turn stuff on and off. You have the final questions as options, which is actually pretty nice because you can do filtering. So you can say, okay, open it as a text file. Oh wait, text default open to. We go open this in Excel, and we can say make a pivot table. Let's say there's certain responses we didn't like, so we can say we want to start filtering out, like, who's bad, who's good. So we have one either go smoothly as a filter. Oh man.
And actually, so the final question stores it
So only people who responded smooth, and we can even say, okay, show us how that affects the user. So we've got usernames over here in the rows. So here are 2 users, and we need a code for that FQ. So that one didn't change anything, so let's drop it. Let's look at, have you participated in this experiment before? That's a good one to filter by. So usually if you had a monitor at not a ridiculous resolution, this would all show up on one screen. So I can say naive, those are the people who've not done it before. So it keeps knocking people down. So this is a good way to like start getting rid of data of like, oh, this person did it 2 times, 3 times before you start changing the rows and columns you care about. But I think this is good to talk about later. Done? We're running out of steam every time.